All right, thank you very much, Ed. Pleasure to be here in Barcelona in Spain. It's a little bit warmer here than it is in Toronto, so I'm happy to be here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about AI. Is it hype? Is it reality? What are we doing with AI when it comes to machine learning at Geotab? So there's, we live in this really messy world right now where we have a ton of data constantly coming at us on a day-by-day basis, and figuring out what we do with that data can oftentimes be quite complex. So to give you an idea of and perspective of the types of data that we're dealing with and the scale that we're really working at, I thought I'd share a few numbers with you. So the first I'm going to share with you is 24. And that's actually the number of trips that we take to the sun in 1 month, which is pretty incredible. 13. That's actually the number of trips we took to the sun last year at around this time. So it's incredible how much the ecosystem has grown, even in just a single year. And that's all of the data coming in to our ecosystem. 3.6 billion. That's the number of kilometers collectively driven by all of Geotab vehicles in the ecosystem in just a single month. 1.3 million, as Ed just said. You can guess what this is. This is the total number of active subscribers, and that's up again. We were at 1 million on February 14th, so a tremendous amount of growth in just a few months. 3 billion, the total number of raw records that we process on a daily basis at Geotab. It's pretty incredible. And when you unpack all of that data, if you were driving each kilometer by each kilometer, you'd be looking at 30 billion records on a daily basis that is coming into our platform. 5, a little bit of a lower number there. But that's the average age of fleet vehicles in our ecosystem. And 60 million, the total number of erratic driving incidents that we have each month in our ecosystem. So that's harsh braking, hard acceleration, hard cornering. So some staggering numbers there. And in 2018, we had about 23 billion connected devices across the globe. That's pretty staggering. That is, if you look at the population, about 3 devices for every 1 person. And if you extrapolate that down into 2025, we're expected to hit 8.2 billion people in 2025 on the Earth. So that means that the estimates look at about 75 billion connected devices across the globe. And that's 9 devices for every single person. So we have all of these devices talking to each other, and we're communicating with them. There's a lot going on there. So why is that so important? Why is it important for us to understand AI? Because AI helps us understand what's going on with all of this data, right? It's impossible for the human mind to capture all of this and make sense out of it. That's why we have AI. I'll give you a quick example of why that's so important, especially when we're talking about machine-to-machine communication. Let's take the very simple example of a refrigerator. And the refrigerator, knowing that it's running low and it needs to grab some food for me. So I have got AI, little cameras in the refrigerator looking at and sensing, what I'm out of. Maybe I'm out of bread, maybe I'm out of milk. What happens next? Does all of a sudden, a drone come by and drop something off? Does an autonomous vehicle with commonly used supplies, is it driving around my neighborhood, and will it drop off the bread and the milk that I need? How does it decide, where to order that stuff from? Does it get the cheapest? Does it get the food that's going to get to me the quickest? How does this all of a sudden change the fast food industry? Right? Now that my fridge is constantly being replenished. So there are so many things that you need to think about when it comes to these machine-to-machine communications, and they will be a disruptive factor. From this one simple instance, you can see how it can change the way that we live and work in this world. And of course, we need AI to put everything into context. So when I talk about AI, I'm not talking about general intelligence, artificial intelligence. I'm not talking about C3PO, data, R2D2. I'm talking about an area that we specifically look at, which is machine learning. And for those of you who aren't familiar with machine learning, I'll talk to you a little bit about what we're doing with it and why it's important. So we mainly look at 2 different areas of machine learning. One is the supervised area of machine learning. And supervised, what that means is that if I want to be able to write an application that tells a computer, what a tree is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a ton of data to my model, to my AI, and I'm going to give specific labels. I'm going to say, this is a tree, this is a tree, this is not a tree. So it learns by all of this data being pushed at it and all of these labels that we give it. And eventually, it will learn for itself to recognize a tree. Then there's also the example of unsupervised learning. That's where we have no label. So all I'm doing, I'm giving AI a ton of data, and out of it, it figures out, okay, this looks like it's a deciduous tree, this looks like it's a coniferous tree. So it figures out these relationships without even having any labeled data. Some pretty remarkable stuff. And when we're talking about machine learning, I want to really propound the fact that it's much different from the traditional world of programming, right? It allows you to scale things much quicker. So as we grow to 1.2 million, 1.3 million, 2 million, 3, 4 million vehicles, we need AI to help us, right? The traditional way of writing a program, you get some data you throw into the program, you write an application, all your if then else clauses. If I was writing an application that would predict battery failure, I'd have an output. I'd have every single time I'd want to change, parameter, I'd have to change my if then else clause. And I'd say, if the temperature is this, if the cranking voltage is this, then predict bad battery. Well, no, that's gone with machine learning. With machine learning, we flip it around a little bit. And it's a different way of looking at it, right? So we give the machine a ton of data. We give it all the labels and the outputs. This is a bad battery, this is a good battery, and it actually writes the program for us. So that's the way that we need to start looking at things, where it does make sense, especially if we want to scale. And nobody has done this better, in my opinion, than the folks at Google. So I want to share with you just something that they released at their Google I/O event much earlier this year, but I think it gives a good perception of where the world is going from an AI perspective, and it's called Google Duplex. And I'll let Sundar, he does a much better job of explaining it than I would, so I'll leaf off to this presentation. And Pilar, if you can give me a hand with that would be great. There we go.
As I said earlier, our vision for our assistant is to help you get things done. It turns out a big part of getting things done is making a phone call. You may want to get an oil change schedule, maybe call a plumber in the middle of the week, or even schedule a haircut appointment. We are working hard to help users through those moments. We want to connect users to businesses in a good way. Businesses actually rely a lot on this, but even in the US, 60% of small businesses don't have an online booking system set up. We think AI can help with this problem. The amazing thing is the assistant can actually understand the nuances of conversation. We've been working on this technology for many years. It's called Google Duplex. It brings together all our investments over the years in natural language understanding, deep learning, text-to-speech. By the way, when we are done, the assistant can give you a confirmation notification saying your appointment has been taken care of. Let me give you another example. Let's say you want to call a restaurant, but maybe it's a small restaurant which is not easily available to book online. The call actually goes a bit differently than expected. So take a listen.
How may I help you?
Hi, I'd like to reserve a table for Wednesday the 7th.
For 7 people?
It's for 4 people.
4 people when?
Next Wednesday at 6 p.m.
Oh, actually we reserve for after 5 people. For people you can come.
How long is the wait usually to be seated?
When, tomorrow or weekday or?
For next Wednesday, the 7th.
Oh no, it's not too busy. You can come for 4 people, okay?
Oh, I gotcha. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Again, that was a real call. We have many of these examples where the calls quite don't go as expected, but the assistant understands the context, the nuance. It knew to ask for wait times in this case and handle the interaction gracefully.
So some pretty cool stuff there that's going on.
As I said earlier,
in the way that it was able to navigate that conversation. I found it tremendously interesting. And one of the things, after looking at that, I said, you know what? There's got to be an application here for Geotab as well, too. How might we layer on top a Google Duplex onto all the amazing data that we have? So what I did is I took a look at a specific example, and the example was with a resident who happens to be living in a community And she's disgruntled because there's a ton of speeding going on in her community, and she calls up her local municipality, and the call goes like this.
Hi there. I'm calling to advise you that the speed bumps around the school in my neighborhood just aren't working.
I'm sorry to hear that. Can you tell me what school you're talking about?
Yes, around Sunnydale Public School.
Hold on a sec. Just looking that up. Ma'am, I've reviewed that area, and the average speed during school hours is 40 kilometers an hour, going east along Oxford and 42 kilometers an hour going west.
Well, that's not what I'm seeing.
Ma'am, if you'd like, I can share the full report on this area that was conducted over the last month. Can I send this to your email?
Sure, it's jane@doe.com.
Thank you, ma'am. You'll have that shortly in your inbox.
So just for clarity, that wasn't an actual conversation like the Google Duplex one. But we've done this. We have all of this data already. And to add a layer of Duplex on top of that isn't much of a stretch. We created a virtual pneumatics tube application with a couple of cities in North America, whereby no longer do you have to go and drag out these pneumatic tubes that will count speeds and everything like that across your municipality. That is a waste of time. That is something that should be decades gone by. We've now got the ability to just draw a line anywhere on the map, anywhere you want, and it will tell you the average speeds in and around that area. With the thousands of vehicles that we have driving around, we're able to look at this data at aggregate, right? It's not individual level data, it's aggregate level data, and provide some really strong insight. So when you're talking about things like smart city, this is a key application for any smart city to be able to operate. The notion of machine learning and the code that you actually write for machine learning is actually quite small. So that little box in there, that's all the code that you're actually writing to really activate on a model. There's so much more that goes on behind the scenes. There's a ton of data processing that needs to be put in place. Data quality, we have 100 to 200,000 rows per second that we need to manage coming into the architecture, into our system. It's critical that you start with good data, because if you don't start with good data, your machine learning will learn the wrong thing. So with our curve logic and the way that we calculate the data, we've got every single event in there. So that is absolutely critical for us to be able to learn properly. So this slide here, I just want you to get in your heads that it's not just about the machine learning code, it's about the entire ecosystem you create around that. And we use AI on a daily basis at Geotab, and there's two real reasons that we will use AI. One is for location insight, understanding something about the world around us. So whether it be understanding how a distribution center is configured, whether it be looking at hyperlocal temperature data. And then the second is for vehicle insight, whether you're looking at the vocation of a vehicle or whether you're trying to predict whether or not the battery will fail, which we've done with a number of large customers. I want to share with you a couple of smart city insights that we put in place leveraging AI and leveraging big data at Geotab. And the first is kind of an interesting one that we presented at the Google Next conference in both San Francisco and London recently. And this one was interesting. We took from our data.geotab.com website, we've got a number of areas where people are slamming on their brakes because there's hazardous driving areas within the city, right? So we look at an aggregate number of events. And what we did is we plotted those on a map for Chicago, and we said, what would happen if we adjusted the time horizon, the temperature? What happens if the temperature dropped? The visibility also dropped. The road conditions changed, and the volume of traffic went up. It turns out that it actually changed. So for city planners, when you're planning events and you're looking at first responders, this gives you a really good idea of areas that will experience hazardous driving as a result of changing conditions in driving. Another area is hyperlocal temperature and precipitation data. So we capture down to 150 meters by 150 meters, hyperlocal temperature data and precipitation. So we're looking at the activation of the windshield wipers, and we're saying, we think it's raining over here, we think it's snowing over here. And to be able to do that prediction of rain versus snow, that's leveraging a logistic regression. And when we're looking at machine learning, that's how we're doing. And why that's important is you could use things like weather to help you predict better delivery times as well too. If you think it's going to take a day to have somebody wait around for their parcel, why not shrink it to 2 or 3 hours and do a study to look at how does weather have an impact on your delivery model? And we do that down to the hyperlocal. The other area, which is probably the most complex, is around the notion of vehicle vocations. And so that is understanding how a fleet is moving, right? We have 1.3 million commercial vehicles out there, over 30,000 customers. We have people using it for the telematics device on garbage trucks, on police vehicles, on rental vehicles, you name it. How do we at scale understand what's going on? And that's where we leverage AI and leverage machine learning. We developed algorithms that allow us to classify classes of vehicles into about 15 or 20 different classes of vehicle movement patterns. And why that's important, I can't rely on our customers to say, hey, you know what, this vehicle is operating like a forklift today, this vehicle is operating like an office worker vehicle. I can't rely on our customers to do that. We need to be able to develop AI to do that at scale. And why that's important is from a couple of different areas. It's proved to be crucially important from a benchmarking perspective. You look at fuel economy, and you look at engine idling performance. These are leading indicators as to how well your vehicle will actually operate, how economical it will be when it's leveraged, when it's using fuel. Whether you're driving in the Rocky Mountains or you've got a different usage pattern and you're looking at a hub and spoke delivery model, these are crucial things to understand. It's not based on industry, it's based on the vocation of the vehicle. So we launched earlier this year data.geotab.com. And on that, for those of you who aren't aware, if you log in, you're able to see a ton of data. We've got over 350 million records that we're providing out there for free, right? You get access to all this data. The data is at aggregate, right? So we've classified into 3 different areas: urban infrastructure, location analytics, and weather. On an hourly basis, we are updating weather across the globe right now. And we've got hyperlocal temperature, barometric pressure, and in the coming weeks we'll have windshield wiper activation, which gives us precipitation. We're also launching intersection insights, I believe next week as well too, on the site. And what people are doing with this data is they're using from a few different perspectives. We've got municipalities like Smart Columbus, who won the $50 million DOT grant a couple of years back, and what they're doing is they're pushing all this data into their Smart Columbus operating system. We've also got folks using it to help them provide some context into what's going on with their drivers driving in hazardous driving locations. From a safety scorecard perspective, you need to properly look at the conditions with which drivers are driving in. Are they driving in a hazardous driving area or not? That will impact the score that you provide them. The data science package will also be live in January. We've tested this with a number of different customers already, and we are putting, if you don't have a data lake, this allows you to have one giant data lake to push all of your data in. Data from Geotab, data from your point of sale systems. If you're looking at optimizing time to serve metrics, well, we're great at figuring out the time it took for a delivery to go from the pizza delivery joint to the customer, but we don't know the time it took from the call to the actual vehicle leaving. Merge your point of sale data together with the Geotab data. That's just one simple instance of how you can bring your line of business data together with Geotab data. And we're giving you a ton of code, a ton of aggregate data, and it's all populated into our data science package. Really good for large fleets. The last thing I want to talk about is ethics in AI. And this is crucially important, especially as we do more and more in the world of AI and machine learning. It's important for us to understand how our AI algorithms are actually learning. Like I said, garbage in, garbage out. We really have to understand this. We have a privacy and risk assessment committee at Geotab that looks at individual use cases and understands what will be the potential misuse of this data, And we think a lot around the ethics. So I'd like to quickly share this last video here, and then I'll wrap things up. And it talks about ethics and AI as we go forward here in this future.
There has been a kind of sea change in AI over the last 5 years. Before that, had you asked seriously whether or not we should be crafting a code of ethics for artificial intelligence, as we've seen AI begin to be applied in real applications in Facebook and in self-driving cars.
Now is the time to be talking about these issues. And we are the people who will be deciding what society looks like for our children in an AI and roboticized world.
Over time, software is going to be written by software. AI is going to create the AI. So let's get a code of ethics that really prioritizes ethical considerations at the beginning of design, and that will help both the creators of the technology and then certainly the users, because there's a better sense of value alignment for the technology and the people using it.
There is no one universal set of ethical principles, so it will be already very important to try to identify the right values to be used in a particular scenario. And then once you have identified them, of course, you need to understand how to model them and how to embed them inside the AI system that you want to develop and deploy.
When it comes to a split-second decision that will potentially involve a necessary injury or death, and there are trades, what will an automatic car do? This brings to the fore this notion of ethical models in our systems, and whose ethics are they?
We create these technologies, and we need to choose how we want to use them, or otherwise we will be used by them.
This idea of ethics, it's really this glorious opportunity that we have as humans right now today for deep introspection.
The awareness and the intent by creators of this technology is to not be blind, to not ignore those negative possibilities, but to understand them up front, make the world aware of them, and do what we can to mitigate their impact.
How do we represent our values in these systems such that the systems are aligned with us? They would make the same decisions we might make had we had a long time to think about it.
The power of these AI systems is going to be that they do infer a lot, that they will know us better than we know ourselves. We'll be tracked in a lot of different ways with some kind of underlying goal. Is that goal to sell us products? Is that goal to make us more educated, to make us more civil, more open-minded? It's potentially an indoctrination machine. And how that's governed, who runs that, is that going to be strictly for commercial purposes? That's, I think, one of the key questions. This is too powerful just to sell lawn chairs to people. This changes the way you look at the world. So it would be good if it were taken that seriously, I think. How will machines know what we value if we don't know ourselves?
So some pretty cool stuff, interesting concepts to think about. And if I'm gonna leave you with a few things today, is that AI, it's not a fad, it's here to stay. We are leveraging it on a daily basis at Geotab. We are here to help as well too. We've got a new professional services team, an MVP team that's geared at creating these minimum viable products with our customers and our partners, and creating things that will scale really, really well. So please do engage us and invest in yourselves, invest in the data that you're collecting and how you're structuring it. Because as we saw, machine learning is just a small part of the package. You have to invest in everything else. So thank you very much for coming out today to Geotab Mobility Connect to Barcelona. And I'd like to introduce our next speaker on stage, Mr. Dirk Schlimm, who is our EVP.